I hope you're doing well. I'm doing pretty good myself. Just watched Yellowstone. Just love that western. And this video that we're doing right here, right now, is number 100. I had the privilege of doing my first video, which I posted July 1st. But I had made it nearly 2 months prior, and I was not sure. Yeah, every time I watched it, I was just kind of a little embarrassed, and it should have been a clue. And but a friend of mine one time described me as being the most determined man he had ever met. And I kind of had hope that didn't mean stubborn, but it may well have meant stubborn. I did the first video. It was and is called The Black-Haired Warrior Woman. But I was too harsh. I was too hard. I had just come out of a time that typified 2021. A time in my life where everything that I had purposed, thought, contemplated, was being torn away, and one day I hope, it is my prayer that one day I will be able to revisit 2021 and delineate with the clarity of hindsight what it was that I had been confronted with, dealing with. There is a certain horror associated with everything that you are set out to be, was being ripped away, destroyed, made to not count for anything, not count for anything. And anyways, I set out to make the Black-Haired Warrior Woman, to demonstrate the horrors associated with child abuse. In this instance, not sexual abuse, but psychological, all of which is absolutely terrible. I tried to speak for the Black-Haired Warrior Woman, frankly, it was rather confusing. And I tried to speak for the young man who fulfilled a role in her life. And I wanted, in the remake, I wanted to soften what I had done in the first. And I suppose that it is a possibility to do that. I don't know if I have the heart to do it now. I'm not sure. I may use this as a preamble and pray through for an extended period of time before I take a run at this. I will lay down the premise of thought that I had when I did the original Black-Haired Warrior Woman. I had thought it through from many different directions. I had rewritten it in my mind, which is what I do. I don't use notes, although I made a few. Not notes that I put on paper, but I make notes in my mind, and when I'm doing something, it is as though I can see it happening, and I'm not sure if it's a gift or a curse. I don't know. I do know that what I saw was a young 12-year-old baby girl who had been sold by her parents to a very, very rich rancher. And the parents had psychologically abused her. They had demeaned her in many ways, and they at the same time had set a worth, a value upon that child. This story is set in the early 60s, and I set the story down around High River in Alberta here, and I wanted somehow to reach out and touch non-churched people and say, here is a couple, a 12-year-old that went to the rich rancher's place, and he never came near her. And by the time she had turned 22, she had become an extraordinary athlete, taking her hurts at what she believed was rejection by the rich rancher. It may well have been that he was of a slightly different persuasion, shall we say. I think that's the case. And I wrote it, geez. Try to understand what you've written. Try to understand what you were trying to say 6 months ago. Geez, try to understand what you tried to say yesterday. But anyways, the game plan, the story plan, was that by the time this little girl had reached 22, she decided to take things into her own hands. And she very, very, very much wanted a son. And I know this sounds a little similar because I kind of did a little thing not too many videos ago and tried to help myself initially to understand what it was that I was doing back then when I formulated and put to video this story. And she decided in her frustration, anger, disappointment, that she would find a man with whom she could make love, conceive, and have a son. The thing that she didn't count on was that in the giving of herself to that young man, that she would fall in love with that young man, and that they they would just make a sign. And yes, they did it in a meadow beside a stream. A stream upon which the young man, he rested his handgun on a stone. That will come into play later in, I think, a noteworthy sort of manner. And she somewhat interviewed him, but she had been studying him for some time. And yes, they did make love. And yes, they did make love in such a manner that I believe that it honored God. Both these kids, this 22-year-old lady who had been sold by her very own parents to this rich rancher to be his pretend wife, meet his friends, stuff like this. But her heart was open to God. People don't realize when everything in your life is being stripped away, torn asunder, that you reach out to hold on to something that is of value, something that is concrete, something that will give you almost a crutch, almost a cane. When you are wounded in one leg or the other, trust me, you need a cane. I don't like them. Crutches I don't mind, but not canes, but a crutch. And she and he fell deeply, deeply in love. And they recognized the role that God was playing in their love. And they recognized that there was something deeper than what we would call superficial. And yes, they made a son. Every day for 3, going on to 4 months, they got together. And then one day, the young man was sitting on the bank of the little stream, and he heard a horse coming up behind him, and he thought he was just going to be a little bit aloof, which is rather stupid. But I suppose in my heart I'm kind of a bit of a romantic. I believe in good. I believe in God. I would rather watch a movie that had a happy ending than the movies that used to be in the 70s. Everything went in the toilet. I mean, their movies, you walked away more depressed than you did when you sat down. I want to walk away a little bit on the positive side. I want to feel happy. When that young man turned around, he saw not the most beautiful woman in the world, which I named the black-haired warrior woman. And the reason I did that is I met a lady that, to me, bar none, is. Haven't seen her for a long time, too long. But I believe without question that she truly is the exemplification of beauty. And having looked in her eyes, that beauty is not skin deep, not superficial as so many beautiful women can be. She was not even preoccupied, it seemed, with anything other than her smile. Anyways, when that young man turned around, it was the rancher and his whole crew. And they simply said, that they were going to kill him. The rancher said, "You have done your job, and the lady is with child." And that young man had grown, as the lady had grown, into an understanding that God loved them, not the God of denomination or the God of one church as opposed to another church. Come on, people. But they had grown together. Yes, in intimacy. But more important than that, they had grown together in heart, in soul, in spirit. And what they had attained unto was the most amazing magnitude of intimacy, of love. Most people don't understand love. Well, I believe I understand it. I think I'm pretty half scared of it or something. I'm telling you, I believe I'm learning to deal with that. The rancher explained in grave detail that young man had a choice. He could die. The lady could die. The rancher had no connection with that lady at all. Seemingly none. Whereas that young man, his life was premised on that beautiful woman. And correspondingly, that woman had learned of love, true love. It's rather difficult being me to envision the purity of truly being in love, because I thought that I had been in love 3 times. I have been married 3 times and divorced 3 times. And I thought I understood. In retrospect, I truly didn't have a clue. I met that lady, the black-haired warrior woman, and looked into her eyes, and my life changed. I looked at things differently. I had a total different appreciation of being alive. And in the process of time, I learned how to be happy. Not happy because of knowing that beautiful woman, but happy just to have had the privilege of understanding what that sensation is. It's tangible, of being in love. It's as though you can reach within your chest cavity and oh yes, that's the part of my person, my body, my person, my heart, my soul, my spirit, that responded in love to the love that I had hoped was there, still do. The rancher gave the young man the opportunity of leaving and promising to never come back, or the consequences would be unbelievable, terrible actually. And the rancher promised that he would kill both his, what he called property, because I study people. And sometimes when complacency comes along and you take someone for granted too long, people tend to begin to act as though they have a deed to another person's life. You don't have a deed. Indeed, you don't have a deed. Because love given freely, I don't mean by today's standards, nor in the 60s when I grew up. Because you think people are flying fast and fancy and fairly loose nowadays. 60s were remarkable for that. But that young man promised the rancher that he would leave. And he went to where that beautiful woman waited for him. And he explained in grave detail that if he didn't leave, both he and she would lose their lives. And she, being a full-blooded woman of amazing character, she said she would rather be dead than to be separated from him. And together they came to the conclusion that the birth of their son would give grave occasion for great joy for the both of them. The last scene that I painted was them kissing, caressing each other with their lips. And then he rode off into the mountains, and she went back to the ranch and birthed her son and raised her son. And the one thing the rancher had promised was that if that young man ever came back, that the rancher would fulfill his promise of killing both of them. And he was vile. And I know he would. Well, I wrote the story, but I knew he would. And I knew also that the two main characters, the black-haired warrior woman and that young man, they understood that they actually had to fulfill what he said. And I left a 27-year period there where it could be a story, a video from both the black-haired warrior woman and that young man as they worked their way through those many years until she passed away. And when she passed, her son had grown. He was now just about 27 years old. 26, I suppose, if we do proper math, which I'm pretty good at. And that young man, who was no longer a young man, spoke in intimate relationship with God. Most people don't understand that. But he had stayed away from people for all those many years in order that his lady could live. And he had sacrificed his life for her and for her son, his son. And one of the things that she promised him as he was getting ready to leave so many years before was that she would make sure that he met his son, her son, the child that they had made together before God. People are so stupid, I think. They have allocated to the government and to the judge, justice of the peace, the authority of the fulfillment of love between a man and a woman. And nowadays, whatever, I could care less. Whatever. People make choices, walk in it. But their marriage ceremony was truly not a ceremony at all, because she was already married. She had married that crazy rancher when she was 12 years old. And the young man, in his intimate relationship with God, God told him, the warrior woman has come home. You can go see her grave. And that young man did. And everything is centered around High River. I was in Heartland 4 times, just as background. And so I used their little snack bar, coffee shop, whatever, cafe, let's call it, in my story as well. And that young man rode to the graveyard, and the magnitude of feeling, of understanding, of the frailty of man, I kind of shocked myself a little bit. I am going to go to my grave realizing that I made it a bit too rough. Just a bit too rough. But I made it nonetheless. And I believe that my father was all over that. A man cannot hope to understand a lady. Well, it's just not logical. It's just not possible. The scene switches from that graveyard to that older man now. He was young. Well, if he's like me, he probably still feels young, but not quite as young as I feel by a long shot. About 30 years. And he went back to the cafe. I'm not sure if it wasn't called Molly's. I never really paid attention to the signage when I was sitting in that cafe trying to blend in. I don't blend in very well. The director came over to me on the 4th day and he said, don't come back. And I said, well, I hadn't thought I'd screwed up too much. And he says, no. But he said, you don't blend in. And I said, I spent my whole life trying to blend in. He said, you failed. I never did try to blend in, never saw the value in it. No benefit. I don't want to be part of a crowd. I want to walk about 6 feet behind the crowd, off to the side. I want to see who's coming towards me. I want to plan ahead, be ready for what? Who knows? And that young man who had become not so young went into the cafe and met his son. And his son had actually bought the cafe so that he would have an occasion, after that his mother died, to meet his dad, and the conversation was good, and the son and the dad headed to the ranch, and the cowboy that was with the son, one of the hands, rode the young man's horses back to the ranch. And instead of going to the original ranch, they went to where Warrior Woman had built a couple of little log cabins right beside the stream, which was right beside where they had made love so many years before God. And there was a little bridge going over that stream. And as I walked in the mind of that young man, and he walking with his son, and they crossed that little bridge, he looked down and saw the very stone in the stream where he used to set his handgun. And they proceeded over to the veranda on that little log house, and the older man said, "Oh, if this young man, who he is having a hard time calling him his son, because that takes time. That's the building of a relationship." And they had never had time together. But he said, if that young man has children, I sure would like to meet my grandsons. And one of the things that you notice when you truly have a melding, melding, melding of hearts, is that quite often you can carry on a conversation and not say a word. And that young man heard what the older gentleman was thinking about his potential grandchildren. And the young man said, "Would you like to meet your grandsons?" Now, I happen to have 4 grandsons. And so the young man took him to the end of the deck and called his grandchildren over and introduced them. First one that he introduced, I believe, was Jericho. Well, that's the name of my youngest boy's youngest son. Another one was Jake. That's my youngest boy's older son. And Blake, or Boomer, we call him Boomer. That's my oldest boy's youngest son. And they call him Boomer because he's going to be a professional hunter. And Cobol, that's my boy's oldest son. He's kind of a musician. And when the introductions were all done, I might say Jericho's hair is, last I saw, just about as long as mine, not quite. And the young man took the older gentleman over to the front door of the cabin, and Warrior Woman had carved into the door, "Welcome home, my love." And that young man, who had become not so young, the dad, his heart was torn, broken, because what they shared for a short span of time, 3 to 4 months, and people become upset in some ways if they don't have 45 years with the person they love. But you know, sometimes there is not 45 years left. Sometimes there may only be 4 or 5, 10. But you know, if you have 4, 5, 10 years with someone with whom you are in love, it may very well be better than 40 years with someone you really don't even like being with. So I think rather than being upset about the limited time, oh gee, don't know if I could, they're kind of too old or too young or something. Love the one you love with your whole heart for the time you have. In the story, I took that older gentleman up a set of stairs to a loft, and he went through the warrior woman's bedroom door, and there on her bed was her little tiny, it's what is called a Gideon's Bible. It's very similar to the one that I had given to me in grade 2, I believe. Just in education, well, we used to live in a free country. And in that free country, we prayed every morning before class. Catholic schools probably still do it, and I cheer them on. Because the recognition that there is a deity greater than you and I, looking out for us, kind of like a big brother, not like a government who's looking out for you, but they're trying to control you. God doesn't try to control you. He tries to love you and to nurture you into, I always look at my Bible over here in the chair. God tries to nurture you into a relationship with Him that is quite astounding. It's almost reflective of a man and woman who truly are in love. But in this instance, the individuals are truly loving God. And the purity of the intended game plan that God had and has for man and woman is most simply demonstrated in this manner. A triangle, if you look at the top of my hat, the two sides, so a triangle. God at the top, man on one side, woman on the other side. And the closer they work toward God, not manual labor, not earning favor, the closer they approach unto God, the closer they then approach to each other. And if I'm not mistaken, I thought I knew love. I'm sorry. I knew a semblance of love. But I did not know, truly did not know, what being in love is like. Until I looked into that warrior woman's eyes, and they were eyes that defy description. They seemed to be a steel, silver, gray, blue. Dear Lord, I don't have a clue. But the one thing I saw in those eyes was an innocency. I don't care what people say. That's what I saw. I saw a child within an adult body, quite a body, I might add. Well, I never noticed it until the third or fourth time I spoke with her. It's astounding. All I saw was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. Facial features, lips, astounding. So it's no blessed wonder I wrote her right straight into the story. How could I but help? That elderly gentleman, no, he probably wasn't that old, went over to that little Gideon's Bible and got down on his knees beside the bed of the woman who he gladly would have given his life for, and really had. He sacrificed his life for her. He stayed in the mountains for all those years because of his love for her and the knowledge that she would die if he came back. He read in the little Gideon's Bible what the warrior woman had written, and it was, "I will always love you." And you know, nowadays people say, "Well, I love you if, or upon condition that you," that's not love. Love is, I will be anything to you that you will allow me to be, as long as I get to look in your eyes now and again and remind myself, this is love. This is being in love. So time passed, and the time came when that man, in the development of his friendship with God, never went to church. Children don't have to go to church to be at peace with God. You merely have to choose to believe in God. Yes, learn of him in Scripture. Yes, fulfill the sacrifice for sins. The sin is the divisive thing that stands between each individual and God. And that's what Jesus did. Jesus took all your sin upon himself, suffered, bled, and died on the cross, that you would not have to lose your life for your sin. In essence, you wouldn't have to be responsible for your sin. He took care of it. That was God's plan. That's the way God did it. But I painted the picture of that young man who was not so young, walking up to Heaven's Gate. And the door was ajar. The door was open. And as he walked through, he looked ahead and he saw the black-haired warrior woman he had seen pictures on the dresser in her bedroom, and her hair was absolutely stone-cold white. I'd remove my hat, but mine's pretty white, children, a little dark at the bottom here, but that's it. And he walked through Heaven's Gate because he had asked God to forgive him. He had accepted Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior. Thus, he was entitled to enter those gates because he had fulfilled everything that God required of him. Sure, not from living a perfect life, because none of us can do that. And as he walked towards the black-haired warrior woman, he saw that she was as beautiful beautiful as the last time he had seen her before he had ridden off into the mountains. And her white hair was long gone, and it was replaced with the most beautiful head of hair you have ever seen. Oh, my word. Oh, my goodness. I don't know if you will ever get to see her. I truly wish that this little story could well have sold. It hasn't. May one day. I hope it does. Because that black-haired warrior woman that I met at work, I'd gotten up to go get a coffee, and that woman stepped right in front of me. And I thought she was a baby child. I thought she was really young. And she is almost really young. She's quite young, way too young. But I looked into her eyes. I have never seen such beauty. So I hope you get one day, I hope one day she'll actually come and appear on one of these videos. Do a video. Oh my, is she ever well spoken? Articulate. I mean, the lady is the lady. And as he walked towards her, in that little Gideon's Bible, it said, "There be no giving nor taking in marriage in heaven, for we will be as the angels." And his realization was really as mine. I mean, if the only option you have is to stare into the eyes of someone you love, would gladly lay your life down for, boy, you take it. Because you're not guaranteed anything nowadays. I remember a day, and I can't even tell you how long ago, and I was assaulted within my heart, my soul, my spirit, and I thought, God, what would happen if that lady were to pass away? And I thought, what would this life of mine look like without, bar none, the most important person in my life? I mean, I have good friendships with my sons and my grandsons, and yeah, I love them, but they have lives to live. So too does that lady. But I thought, God, don't let her be taken. As much as I love my videos and I love trying to reach out and touch someone's heart, in this life you need purpose. Well, you need love. It's just a fact. I mean, just being around someone who you love, that's pretty good. It's enough for me. So the last scene I painted in my mind was that man who had become young as he walked towards her from the gates into heaven. She was only in about 20 feet. She was just hanging out there, waiting for him. And he became young as he walked towards her. And all they did was the same thing that beautiful, beautiful lady did when she stepped in front of me when I was on my way to the coffee pod at work in the heavy laydown, civil laydown. And I looked into her eyes and I said, "May I?" She didn't know what to say. We looked into each other's eyes. It seemed like, to me it seemed like about 4 minutes. It only took 12.5 seconds, I think. And my life had been changed. Forever changed. And they stood just looking into each other's eyes. And that's what I saw. Well, that's pretty corny. But is it? Is it corny? I don't think so. I think it is God's way of showing me what true love is all about. Perhaps it may inspire you a little. And if there are any men watching, they'll probably throw up. Oh well. Who cares? But anyways, I wanted to do a remake of the Black-Haired Warrior Woman. I don't believe it's in my heart to do. I don't know that I have enough heart left. I don't know. Them's the breaks, children. So, I don't know what you do with this. I don't know if there's any meaning that may benefit you. I don't know. I hope it is such that in all our interaction, you hear one consistent thought, concern that I have, and that is, I care for you. I care for where you're going to spend eternity. You know, I'm so far removed from being religious. And I am a rugged man. Sorry. It's the way I am. Can I change? Well, of course I can change. You don't know what to change when you're off riding alone most all your life. It's what I've done, children. It's what I've done. So, this is our 100th video. If you never watch another video that I do, would you please just consider God loves you. He truly does. He had his son to die for you on the cross. Very short death, yes. Very painful. Because that is the only way that you will ever be at peace with him. Is to say, God, forgive me. I accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. Help me to be what you want me to be. I'm so sorry. People have such bad attitudes of narcissism. Oh, aren't I important? No. No. I'm not unimportant. But more important than the person next to me? No. I don't think so. So let's sum this up. God loves you. I don't know that I would ever recommend looking back to the first video and watch that black-haired warrior woman. I almost would encourage you, wait and see if my God can bring the real black-haired warrior woman to speak to you someday. I hope so. I truly hope so. God bless you. Thank you for allowing me the honor and the privilege of stepping outside my own issues and trying to encourage you to consider God. And consider this. Consider true love. True love. May not be guaranteed 40 years together. Nowadays, there are no guarantees. But if you had the choice of 5 or 10 years of being truly in love, or 40 years of complacency, I think you'd take the smaller number of years of truly being in love. God bless you. God bless you.